Hello, gang, and welcome back to the channel, the place to hear true stories of spine-chilling encounters with unknown creatures, cryptids, and the unexplained. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I'll be sharing 4 true stories submitted by our viewers, detailing their personal encounters with terrifying beings that still haunt them to this very day. And the submitter of the last story, well, she snapped a photo of what she saw that day and was nice enough to include that photo to be shared here. So stay to the end. You won't want to miss this one. Now grab your gear and let's ride. Number 1. Hey Biker, I have something I wanted to share. It all started out a few months ago when we moved into our new home in the U.S. Northeast. I grew up in a rural community, but there were still plenty of neighbors and mostly fields around, no woods. Given that I'm the youngest child, my parents waited until I was done with high school to move to not affect my already established life. Although we had always lived in a small rural community, my parents were ready for something a little more secluded, something with a lot of acreage, woods, and a place to shoot. They put my childhood home up on the market and soon found their dream home, which is where I am currently, and desperately writing the story. The house and the property are beautiful. It's a large, turn-of-the-century house facing 15 acres of land, the majority of which are wooded, and a nice half-acre pond. The best part, or so I thought, is that there are no neighbors within a mile of us. At first, I really enjoyed it. Being out in the woods was very much a cathartic experience for me. It helped shed the stresses of school and studying. Just being among the tall trees and the surrounding nature made all my problems seem totally insignificant. So I made a habit of going on regular walks through the woods. As the weeks went on, I started noticing strange things on my walks. I would find partially eaten deer scattered along the leaf-littered ground, accompanied by a putrid, rotting smell which I attributed to the carcass in front of me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was probably coyotes, and that's what I would tell myself. Other than that, I thought nothing of it, but I started carrying a gun with me on these walks, just in case I encountered the animal that was responsible for the carnage that I kept finding. As the days went on, I started noticing more and more mutilated deer scattered across the floor of the woods, still accompanied by that rotting smell, which again I attributed to those animals. If the increasing number of mutilations weren't enough, I started to notice a change in the sounds coming out of the woods. What was once a cacophony of sounds was now mostly dead silence, minus the low, guttural growl that seemed to be becoming more prevalent, more pronounced, and more insidious each day. By this point, I'd stopped going on my little walks. Gun or no gun, I didn't want to risk the chances of facing whatever was causing these things. That being said, my curiosity eventually got the best of me one night. As I heard its growls, I decided that I was going to get a trail cam and set it up in the woods the following day, in hopes of finally seeing what was really out there. The next evening, after work, I gathered up what little courage I had left and, camera in hand, went walking out into the very woods that I'd promised myself I'd stay out of. I never did get to set up that trail cam. I lost it somewhere in the woods while I was in a panic, running for my life. I made it about 100 yards past the tree line into the woods where I decided to stop to set up the camera. I thought it was a good place to set it up, and quite frankly, I was too scared to go any further. After all, I wanted to spend as little time out there as possible, given the ongoing events, and the fact that it would be dark soon didn't help. Already on edge, every creak of the woods and every crunch of the leaves set me into a panic. Rushing to get it set up, I dropped it, sending it to the leaf-ridden ground with a thud. Muttering under my breath and cursing myself for even being out here, I bent down to pick up the camera. when I started to smell that putrid smell of rotting flesh again. Looking carefully around, checking my surroundings to see if anything was out there. I swear I could feel something watching me, but I still couldn't see anything. Just as I was finishing picking my supplies up off the ground, I heard that low guttural growl again, as well as the snap of a branch to my right. I quickly turned, seeing a human-like creature standing there, just staring at me. I was completely frozen in fear. It had human features, standing on two legs, it had feet, it had hands. The things that threw me off, however, were the fact that its skin was charred black, like it had been burned in a fire. And, most disturbingly, it had no upper or lower lips. Although mostly bald, a few thin and straggling hairs stuck out every which way from its scalp. Its sharp teeth were hanging out, and they looked like hypodermic needles. With the absence of lips, its raw and red gums hung out in the open. Thick strings of what appeared to be saliva dripped off its chin in a persistent stream. For one single brief moment, the world around me seemed to stop, and I quickly went through the options on what I could do. There were really only two viable options. Either stay exactly how I was or get attacked and most likely killed by this thing, or I could get the hell out of there. So I chose the latter. I quickly scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, throwing my camera in vain at the creature behind me. In the chaos of what had just occurred, I found myself to be momentarily lost after running in what I thought was the right direction for what felt like 20 minutes, but I'm sure it was only about 30 seconds. Looking around and not seeing the spawn of hell that I'd just encountered, I stopped to collect myself and tried to find the way back to my house. I finally decided on the general direction in which I should head when I heard a commotion that almost sounded like a horse pounding its hooves in the dirt. I looked behind me and saw that thing, whatever it was, running at me on all fours, spit flying out of the corners of its mouth like a rabid dog. I ran as quickly as I could without daring to look behind me. And although I wouldn't look at it, I could hear it galloping behind me and could still smell its rotting flesh. Tears running down my eyes as I thought there was no possible way to make it out of those woods alive when I finally saw the lights of my house out in the clearing. Using the adrenaline that I had left to sprint the last 200 yards or so to my back porch, I quickly opened the door and slammed it shut, not even daring to look out the window. It's been about a month since that happened, and I haven't told anyone, and I won't dare go back out in those woods. I've been doing a lot of research to see if I could find any clues as to what this thing might have been. I've exhausted myself, but I think I may have finally come to a conclusion. The closest thing I could possibly think of was a skinwalker, and I know my sighting doesn't entirely match up with the stories I've heard, in both lore or location, but it's the closest thing I've found. Thanks. Signed, Silas. Number 2. Hey biker, I wasn't sure if I should share this story with anyone outside of my small circle of people that were there, but I wanted to share my experience in hopes that it saves someone's life or gives an understanding of what someone else maybe experienced. It was late fall of 2010 in northern Canada, and I went deep into the wilderness with my father and older brother to hunt for moose. We left in the early morning, just before sunrise, trying to cover as much distance as possible before nightfall. We traveled winding rivers and had to repeatedly portage over rapids all day. We decided to set up camp just over halfway to our destination. My dad figured that we'd make the rest of the journey tomorrow. Well, when everyone bedded down for the night, I decided to go grab some firewood and relieve myself down by the bank of the river, just out of reach from the light from the campfire. Out from the tree line, about 15 yards away, I could hear rustling in the bushes, and I watched the area where I heard the noise and focused on that spot. I suddenly felt kind of dizzy and lightheaded, and I could smell this awful odor, like old milk or rotten food. Then I saw the trees starting to morph and move ever so slightly, and begin to take the shape of a head and slight facial features. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness, and along the tree line, I could hear this voice coming from there. I recognized it. The voice sounded like one of my relatives who had recently passed away. The face took the shape of my relative. "Hello," they said. "I've missed you. Come see me." I smiled and stepped forward a bit, but stopped to think about the situation. My relative's face stopped smiling and became emotionless. The skin began to turn pale and peel away. Chunks of flesh from their cheeks began to fall away, and I felt shock and fear overwhelming my body. I couldn't make sense of it all, so I started back away and make my way back to camp. I didn't realize at the time that I'd been walking towards the voice, and I was much further away from the campfire than I thought. The voice suddenly became angry and began shouting at me to come here. So I turned to run away, but as I looked back one more time, I saw the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen. It was rotting flesh on gnawed bone, caved-in eyes, and a hollow chest cavity. It was a humanoid creature that was tall and super thin. I ran as fast as I could, trying to yell for help, but the fear made my voice quiet and raspy. And I ran along the riverbank, and I could hear the heavy breath and the stomping feet from this thing right behind me. I made it to the top of the riverbank, but it grabbed a hold of my leg as I jumped up. I gripped and tore the grass, trying to lift myself, and yelled as loud as I could. And then finally my voice came back, and I yelled, "Someone has my leg." My brother woke up and ran to where I was, and he pulled me up and took me over to the fire. I was completely terrified and trying to explain what I saw, and that it looked like my relative, but not. I was trying to convince them that I wasn't seeing things, but my brother nodded his head and said, "I saw it too. I know." That solidified it. He acknowledged that it was real. We stayed up all night after that, loaded rifles close by, and we packed up when the sun was coming up and went back home. We haven't shared that story with anyone out of fear of being labeled as crazy or outright liars. I've had nightmares and couldn't sleep for months afterwards. I would see things, dark figures, looking into my window, or hear whispers when I was walking home at night. Eventually, I saw this dark figure daily, and I went to the medicine man and shamans for help, but I've learned that the ceremonies only relieve it temporarily. Friends have given me everything from protection pouches to weird crystals. I found out that there's a strong possibility that I encountered a wendigo. I learned that if you encounter one and survive, then it attaches itself to you like a parasite. I learned that it could only do this if it touched you, which it did. And ever since that night, I've been on edge when I enter any forest or wooded area, which sucks because before this, I loved being outdoors, hunting, and in nature. And now I always feel like I need to keep my back against something when I'm out in the wild. Anyways, you can make your own conclusions about this. I've paid the price for being an ignorant child to the stories of old. They are real. I can attest to that. Signed, Bobby. Number 3. Hi TB. I've really enjoyed your channel since I found it a few months ago. I wanted to share one of my experiences at Ayers Rock in Australia. About 15 years ago, I went on a study abroad trip with my university to Australia for a few months. We started in Darwin and traveled south. The bus ride itself was pretty uneventful, except for me and my friend being accidentally left at Devil's Marble for a few hours, but that's a whole other story. We stayed at a hostel in Alice Springs and got up before dawn to drive to Ayers Rock. The rest of the students had decided to go back to sleep for the bus ride, but I was looking out the window at what little I could make out of the scenery. It was around that time before dawn when you are first able to make out your surroundings. The bus slowed down to park and made a turn into an empty lot, and that's when I saw it. An extremely large shadow walking through the bush. Now, I'm a bad judge of height, but this thing was taller than any human I'd ever seen. Maybe even 10 feet tall, with extremely elongated arms and legs. Even though there was enough light to make out details of the landscape, the figure disappeared completely. Well, detailless. Like it was smooth, black and featureless. The black was a stark contrast to the rest of the scenery, as there was a thin mist in the area. I've seen flashes of shadows driving before, or something under the corner of my eye, but this was different, as I was able to watch it for several seconds as he walked in this odd, swaying dipping motion, with a distinct grace, moving effortlessly across the bush. I felt like, as soon as I saw it, that I'd been electrocuted, every hair standing on end. I tried to wake my friend, but by the time she looked out the window, it was already gone. I'm sure this could be explained away by sleep deprivation or just seeing shadows, but I personally feel that what I saw was very real. Hopefully, someone will contact you further with more information about hearing my account. Thanks. Signed, Harper. Number 4. Hey TB, my best friend of 10 years and I went adventuring by ourselves in Mount Rainier National Park, located in the upper left-hand corner of Washington State. This was back in 2005. I grew up in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, and my neighborhood best friend of 11 years, named M, married a radar tech on a submarine for the U.S. Navy while I attended college. I studied psychology in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at Temple, and they were stationed in the Puget Sound area. I flew out for her birthday in late October and Halloween in Seattle. Mount Rainier is a large, active stratovolcano. It's actually on the Decade Volcano list, meaning it's been identified as significant because of its history of huge and harmful eruptions next to highly populated areas. Pretty much, the day consisted of hours of driving through the Cascade Mountain Range. Things got weird after we reached the highest part we could reach, which was the Paradise Inn at the Henry M. Jackson Memorial Visitor Center. Nothing was really open here as far as the inn went because it was late in the season, and as of November 1st, your vehicle must have changed to enter certain areas of the park because of the impending snow. Your car is almost always alone. You see other people. It's chilly, so a few here and there at the really stunning viewpoints. After 30 minutes of swearing, we passed the same dead-slanted birch tree at least 3 or 4 times. Our deja vu was getting overwhelming. Driving slow, since the speed limit was only 30, with our windows down, we eventually reached a point in the mountains that I'd lost precisely on the map because I was taking a selfie of M while she was driving. I know we were somewhere after Paradise Inn because the snow was sparse but still present. I was in the middle of asking her if she felt all right when the car in front of us came to a sudden stop fast enough to make my body bounce off the seat. That's when I see a person, I think, in what looks like maybe a hood by the tree line. I still had the camera open, so I snapped a picture. I've lived in North Philly for 4 years, and never in my life have I ever felt a terror so severe and all-encompassing than how I felt at that very moment. How I felt was more indicative of something's presence than someone's. I'll just say that much. It then skittered off faster than anything that I've ever seen, and completely silent too. It kind of looked like it was wearing some type of long cloak with a hood. Its size wasn't really consistent with that of a person. It seemed really, really large. I think that's what's bothering me is that in broad daylight, my friend and I could not make out any features. Sure as hell wasn't a hiker though. Not many out this late in the season anyway. M keeps telling me that she's sure about it being about 7 feet tall. I didn't see any hands or arms, but the movement was so quick. The car in front of us sped off so fast, we never got the chance to ask if they also felt like they were in the Twilight Zone. I've included the picture I snapped. I hope to get some feedback from your community. Thanks, Biker. Signed, Paige. And there it is. All I have for you tonight. Thanks to everyone who submitted their terrifying encounters. And remember, if you have a story to share, don't hesitate to reach out to me via the email in the description, and your experience just may wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.